Well, good evening, everyone. It's good to have you joining us wherever you're watching from, whoever you're watching with. Welcome.
It's good to be here.
It is.
Good to be live.
Live. It's been a while since we've been live.
It has been.
Well, not alive. Live streaming.
It's been a while since we've done a live broadcast. It's normally recorded, so this is going to keep us on our toes to make sure we can't edit this. You're going to get the raw us tonight.
Raw. Monday Night Raw. That was actually a wrestling program.
Oh, wow. It's definitely not
Monday
that.
night. No wrestling going to be taking on here. But listen, we're going to have a great conversation this evening. Tonight is our first live stream. It's our first foray into a monthly live stream that we're calling Growth Lab Live. And the reason we're calling Growth Lab Live is because we want anybody who is passionate about growth in personal development, growth as a disciple, growth as a leader, growth in our growth circles, which is a concept that we at Everyday Champions use. We'll talk a little bit more about that because some people that are on the live stream may not be aware of what a growth circle is. But growth is at the heart of this, and we love anything about growth.
Yeah, but obviously growth is never a linear process. We don't nicely go from one thing to the next. Sometimes you feel like you've gone back a bit, or then there's an acceleration, there's ups, there's downs, there's roundabouts. And that's probably what we're going to look at, is that growth, although it's happening all the time, is never just a straightforward, linear, progressive process. There's always twists and turns.
Peaks and troughs, mountaintops, valleys, however you want to describe it, absolutely. And that's how we want to frame the conversation this evening. We have entitled tonight's conversation, each time we have a Growth Lab Live, we'll have a particular theme. But tonight's is how to navigate the triumph and trauma of transition. And growth requires those moments when we don't feel we can go any further. We can't go forward, but we can't go back. We feel trapped. We feel stuck. Those moments can be very scary moments, very anxiety-inducing moments. But we've got good news for you this evening. If you are in that transition right now, then we're going to talk about things that we have learned from our journey of how to navigate and to win in those moments between the now and the not yet. Because let's face it, Leanne, we've been there many, many times, and you very often don't feel like you're winning when you're stuck between the now and the not yet.
Very rarely, in fact, if ever, do you feel that you're winning when you're in that position, because it's such a scary, unknown place to be. You can feel very isolated. You can feel quite on your own, like nobody really understands, because you've left the kind of familiarity of what you know in the now. You're launching towards the future, the vision of what you want, but you're in this bit in between where it's a bit of a no man's land. It can feel like the wilderness, which obviously the Bible talks about, but you certainly don't feel like you're winning. But actually, we are winning if we keep moving forward. It's just that we don't feel like we are. And
I think that's the key, isn't it? It's not to rely on our feelings to be the barometer of how things are going, or to kind of be the benchmark. And so how do we navigate that? And that's what we're going to be talking about this evening. In fact, earlier on today, I was sharing with a group of young footballers about a moment on our journey. Funny enough, it was actually part of a program that I was delivering, and today was the day I was sharing it, and tonight we're talking about it. So it was almost as if those conversations were aligned. And so I was talking about a day in April, I believe it was, 2015. We had several months before moved from Nottinghamshire, from Newark to Greenwich here in London. And of course, we did that with a clear vision of where we were heading to, but we found ourselves in a period where we felt stuck. And it was in that moment where we didn't know what the next step was, so we didn't feel we could move forward. But at the same time, we couldn't go back because we knew that we were there for a reason. Of course, when you've got people that you're responsible for, children, church and people that are relying upon you, that increases the stakes, in terms of what you're responsible for. And so it was a painful day. Can you remember it?
The question is more like, have you forgotten it? No, I absolutely cannot forget, and will never forget that day, because, today we use the word trauma quite a lot.
Yeah.
And in the right sense, trauma does happen. Terrible things happen to people. But I believe that particular time is quite traumatic for us as a couple and as individuals. So I can't forget that day.
and that's the thing, people talk about, there are significant emotional events that happen in our lives, and any event that it has high emotion attached to it, we remember. And of course, those can be moments of great joy, giving birth to a child, which was extremely painful.
And traumatic.
For you. I lost a lot of sleep, but that was all it really cost me. But also those kind of events where there is high anxiety, high fear. And again, they create moments that we remember. But these are high growth moments. So every significant emotional event is an opportunity for growth. And I believe this evening we're talking to people who are not only responsible for your own personal development and discipleship journey, but also for other people. So please, as we go through this conversation, yes, be thinking about you and your journey, because it's relevant to your growth and development. But also, we've got to get this to help those that we're responsible for. And I believe the reason we're here tonight talking about this was because we didn't quit in that moment back in 2015. We're not perfect. We've made mistakes, but we didn't give up. We kept going. We pressed through in the moment when your feelings are saying there is no future, that you've made a fatal error. In that moment, of course, with our faith and our trust in God, who was leading us and guiding us, it was in that moment that we could absolutely believe that this was a growth moment. And I think when you're responsible for other people, and we've got people who may have leadership roles or titles on this conversation this evening, but even if you haven't got a role or a title, you have an influence over people. And so you need to see it not just through the lens of yourself, but you need to understand the transition process for other people.
Yeah, and it's getting the balance, isn't it, between knowing that you are responsible for leading other people, but not allowing that to become a negative pressure. Because I think for me in that time particularly, that was probably the tipping point of where it became traumatic, was taking on the wrong side of responsibility for other people, and letting that be the driving force and the pressure. Because then what happens, it was like, well, what do I tell people? How do I example to people that I know what I'm doing? I've got it all together. Or you can follow me because I'm a great leader. I know what I'm doing. And that pressure, it tips into very egocentrical. It can be about me, how I look, how I come across. They won't think I'm a good leader. They won't think I'm close to God in those moments when I'm asking him for direction, all of those things. And so it's important to hold it in perfect tension of, yes, I have to get this right because I'm leading other people, and that's a position of responsibility, whether that's a team, whether that's church, whether that's just your own family and your children, but not allowing that to tip into something that became very negative and thinking, oh, the buck stops with me, because it actually doesn't. Yeah. It does, in the sense I've got responsibilities, but when we trust God, actually the buck stops with him. If he's asked us to do something and we step out, it might not look great at the time, but if we have a conviction and a trust in him, then really it's him that it stops with, not with us. Yeah,
it's a great point. It's a responsibility, but it can't be a pressure. And I think what we want to do as we go through this conversation this evening is to draw on the different analogies that we have, and there are analogies in the Bible, there are analogies in creation that help us to understand that this process of transition is part of the design. It's part of God's design. And so one of the things I was talking about today in my session as I was explaining this day that we had and we experienced, I was talking about the fact that we were in a community where we didn't know anybody, and it felt a very hopeless moment. And I don't know if you remember this, but actually it wasn't long after that day when I reached out to somebody in the community who was actively involved with the local football club, and I sent him a text message just to say, listen, I really believe in supporting and helping others that are doing stuff in the community. If there's anything I can do to support you, let me know. And long story short, that one moment, and you said there, where you have to get your eyes off yourself. In a moment when the transition almost feels like all the lights are on you, like almost like all the stage lights are fixed on you and nobody else. In that moment, the way to break that is to serve. It's to look to build somebody else up or build what somebody else is doing. And that ended up leading to my involvement at the football club, involved in sports chaplaincy, and that then snowballed over years, even into what I've been doing today at the football club. And so in those moments of pain, when you start to think, okay, how can I serve somebody else? How can I contribute? How can I make this about somebody else and helping to build what somebody else is doing? In that moment, it's make it about somebody else. Make it about serving somebody else. And I believe when you do that, it's almost like you uncork the bottle and you find a way where there doesn't seem to be a way. And of course, I didn't know that was going to lead to opportunities. But it's a principle that in that moment when you are highly fearful, it's an opportunity to create something new. It's an opportunity to build something. And the analogy I used today, Leanne, was the one of it's a well-known picture. It's that of the caterpillar and the metamorphosis to the butterfly. And of course, go and put it into YouTube at some point. Okay. I watched it for 2 minutes yesterday, and I'm going to be a bit vulnerable right now with everyone. Okay. When I watched it, I started to cry. Now I started to cry, not because I felt sorry for the caterpillar who was eating this leaf, stuffing himself on this leaf, which is what they do. They eat till they're so fat that they start to go into this transition process called metamorphosis. But I started to cry because I realized, wow, what I'm witnessing is a miracle in creation, and that the transition that this caterpillar was going into was going to produce an incredible future, which of course that's what happens. The caterpillar leaves its existing state. It goes into the chrysalis, which essentially is a soup, a gloop, where it's no longer what it was, a caterpillar. It's not yet what it will be, a butterfly, but it's in this in-between state, between the now and the not yet. It's trapped in this process. But the trapping is preparing it, training it, developing it to become what it needs to become. And there's this cell involved in this process called the imaginal cell. And the imaginal cell is essentially the butterfly cell, in other words, the future, that starts to attack the old structure of the caterpillar. And in this process, there is death, the death of the old, giving way to the life of the new. And that's what's happening right now at the point of you feeling trapped. There is a death of the old, but the good news is that there is a birth of the new. And that chrysalis time is dark, it feels hopeless, but there is more going on in you than you realize.
Just for a moment there, I thought I was in a science lesson. It was brilliant. I was taken back to my school days. If only it had always been that interesting.
I didn't cry in science, only when it was test time and I didn't know what to put down on the test paper.
But it's in that moment that you described there, like we all know what happens to the butterfly, to the caterpillar that then becomes the butterfly. But when you don't have that actual future tangibly in front of you, that's the bit where you can feel trapped, stuck. And even though we described that time in 2015, that was probably the first time that I'd felt it that strong, like absolutely ready to quit. But that hasn't been the only time. There have been several moments since, and maybe I'm not learning, where I feel, or we felt, that sense of being trapped, being stuck, and yet it's like we've done this before. God took us through the last time. He'll do it again. We have to learn. But that middle part, like you described there with the caterpillar, is exactly what it's like. It's that you're in a soup of feelings, emotions, a bit of the past, hopes for the future, and maybe it's a bit of disappointment that things haven't worked out exactly as you thought they were going to work out, because we all have a plan, don't we, in our head?
An expectation.
Yeah, and I'm going to do this, and in 2 months it's all going to work out, and then here you are 2 years later still scratching your head at kind of the first base of whatever that might be, whether that's in your work, your family, or ministry, whatever that is. But it's important to remember in that moment of feeling like that isn't the end if you don't want it to be.
Yeah.
You can walk away at that point. I mean, the caterpillar can't, but we can. We
Yeah.
can just go, do you know what, that's it, it's over. Or we can wait it out, trust God in the process. And none of us like process. Process is like, I'm allergic to the word process. When you hear we've just got to go through this process, I'm like, no. I tell you what, put me to sleep. I like hibernation. Put me to sleep and then just wake me up when it's all done. But God doesn't work like that. You said something the other day. What was the quote? We like the end, but God likes process.
We like outcomes. God loves the journey.
We like outcomes, but God likes the process, because it's in that process where we're actually developed. And like you said, there's the cell of the future that is pulling us forward, that is killing off the past and pulling us forward. And that's what we need to hold on to. And you find that in your spirit of like the real part of you. When you listen to feelings and thoughts, it can just mess you up. But when you tune into the real part of you and you go, no, I'm going to hold on to that and trust in this process.
And I think, you think back to that analogy of the butterfly. The butterfly picture is one of an incredible future. It's a completely different existence to the caterpillar. And the future that God has for you is quite literally as chalk and cheese as that. I believe you look throughout the Bible, God exposes us to big thoughts. Abraham was exposed to a big thought. His wife couldn't have children, and yet he's told and given the promise, I'm going to bring through you a great nation. Not just a child, but a great nation. Like, that is a big thought. But God exposes us to big thoughts because then he needs to make us big people. So the big thought of the butterfly requires the caterpillar now to become a caterpillar on the inside as well as on the outside. And I believe when we had the vision in 2015, it was a big vision, a big thought, and that required us to become bigger on the inside. And that's where the transition takes place. And that's why a lot takes place under the surface, below ground. And I'm going to show you something that we put in our book, The Winning Motivation. It's come on the screen right now, and here you can see, and we've used this multiple times, and for us this creates a very clear picture of the transition. So if you imagine there you are right now, and under that little man's feet says current reality, or that little person's feet says current reality, that's you, okay? That's the now. And you're looking across at the future possibility. And right now, that future possibility is like C, the letter C. And where you're stood now is like the letter A. And of course, what is missing? B. Like, B is the valley. B is the, like, how are we going to move from A to C? It's like the caterpillar saying, well, yeah, I can see the butterfly. I'd love the future of the butterfly to be able to fly, to be able to move from place to place rather than being stuck on the same leaf. And yet I can't see what B looks like. And of course, B is the metamorphosis. B is the chrysalis. B is the dark place where the old structures and the old beliefs and the old attitudes and the old habits need to be disassembled, and then new thoughts, new habits, new beliefs start to be formed on the inside so that we can move and make our way to C. And it's this tension that we're caught between.
I'd love to just get a plank, though, from A to C, just like flop it over, forget all of that dip and just go straight. But God knows that we need that process. We need to go through those things. And you might look at each of those things and think, yeah, I'm at that point. Maybe you're at the bottom of the bottom right now, or maybe you feel you're climbing up. It doesn't matter where you are on that process. But I know in that time and several times since, when I was in the midst of that process, right at the bottom, thinking, I can't do this. And that's the real shift, the kind of tipping point, as I keep calling it, where you either give up or you give it over to God. Yeah. And giving up looks like walking away from everything and regretting it, essentially. But giving over is the surrender, where you go, okay, I'm gonna continue on this process.
Absolutely.
And I'm glad on that day, that you did that. I was ready to give up. This is where I get to be honest. Because feelings for me, probably as a female, we have to be honest here. Generally, as females, we feel things more. And in our kind of team as a marriage, you took the leadership at that time, because I was ready to walk away and have been at other points. But you took that moment to see the vision, see the future, and push forward. And out of that, lots of amazing things have happened, and it encouraged us. But I think it's important that we don't give feelings. They're important in the sense that God has given us feelings, but they shouldn't be the driving force. They shouldn't be the only thing that drives us, because they will point us in completely the wrong direction, and will change with the wind, will change with whether we're tired or hungry, or they're not reliable on their own. It's important that we stick to conviction. If we just have an opinion about something, it will fall flat. We have to know that we know that we know that we know that we're doing the right thing, and stick with that.
Absolutely. And I mentioned growth circles earlier. Growth circles, for those who don't know, are where, roughly half a dozen people, could be more, could be less, but at least two people, it needs to be at least a group, come together, and they have a desire for growth. Okay, they have a desire for growth. And that could be a discipleship growth circle. In other words, people who are followers of Christ, and therefore there's this desire to understand the big thoughts of God and then to become big people for God. Or it could be development circles. So that could be circles that are in businesses, that could be in communities, that are about helping people to grow and to develop with big visions of possibilities that could be brought about through business ideas or transformation in community or society. And again, there's a sense in which we come together because we recognize, if you're going to embrace a big future, you're going to have to be prepared to become a big person. And that is going to require growing pains. And like Leanne said there, and you help me as much as I help you, different ways, but you can't do it alone. You need a community of like-minded people. Now that's really important, because Joseph in the Bible reminds us that you can have a dream, but he was surrounded by brothers who were dream killers, not dream champions, and they literally tried to extinguish the dream by extinguishing the brother. And so you need to be around a group of people that you can be vulnerable with. In those moments when you feel like, I can't go on, say it. Be honest, be open, be vulnerable. Say, right now, I want to get to C, but I have not got a clue how I'm going to get through B. It feels too hard. I feel like I'm going to give up. You need people around you. And if you're on this broadcast this evening and you're going through this transition, but you've not got people around you, and you want people around you, why don't you get in touch with us? personalrevolution.tv, at the bottom right-hand corner of the website, either on your device or online. There's a little chat icon, and again, that sends an email to us. We'd love to hear from you, maybe about what your current challenge is. This is about creating a community. Start to create a conversation that doesn't stop. We're here, we're committed to helping people through those transitions. We believe it's a responsibility given to us by God to help people. Whether you're a person of faith or not, we are here to help you, okay? And so we really believe in this. And in the second part of our conversation this evening, we're going to talk very practically about 5 shifts that need to take place that we learnt. And we've got lots more to learn, so we're just going to share what we've learned. But 5 shifts that need to take place, and also 5 ways in which the new app that our team have developed can help you practically with the transition that you're going through, and how you can use it to help others going through their transition, okay? So make sure you stay tuned. We're just going to have a 30-40 second interval break, okay? Not long enough to make a cup of tea, but long enough just to stretch your legs, stand up, sit back down. And so we'll be back in one moment. Make sure you join us, because we are going to go through these 5 shifts, and we can't wait to share them with you. So back in a moment. Okay, we told you it wasn't long enough to make a cup of tea. Your cup of tea is coming up, okay, once you've understood these 5 shifts. We think they deserve a cup of tea, or maybe even a cup of coffee, or is it a bit late for a coffee?
Bit late for coffee, definitely.
Yeah. Okay, so we're going to talk about these 5 shifts. And let me just say right now, just again, by way of context, you know, over the last 25 years of our marriage and leadership, there have been different transitions that we've been through. Transitions of changing culture within a church. Transition of helping people in cultural transition in businesses, in organizations. And it's amazing when you see how people behave in transition, what comes out of people. And again, we've got Old Testament examples of the children of Israel coming out of Egypt. You'd have thought that all 1 million plus Israelites who left Egypt, even though the journey in the wilderness was tough, the journey through B caused many to give up. And in fact, a whole generation missed out because they couldn't cope with the transition.
And when you think it could have happened in such a shorter period of time, they took so long because there was human nature that basically got in the way, and feelings, and where really that could have been a straightforward transition. But they decided to do it the long way round, as we always do, because human nature gets in the way.
Do you know what they needed? Growth circles. They needed a group in that 1 million plus people who were of the same mind, same mindset, that could have set a different example.
Maybe somebody was trying to start circles at the time and just, it didn't happen, but you never know.
Hey, so listen, we believe what we're going to share with you this evening is going to help you accelerate through that transition. You can't bypass it, but I believe, like you said, Leanne, you can move at the pace at which you're supposed to move and not lag behind, and certainly not quit. So the first shift is the shift of position. The shift of position. What we mean by that is the shift in how you see yourself. So go back to our analogy. There's a point at which, and again, I'm obviously stretching the analogy here, but there's a point at which, coming out of the chrysalis, that the butterfly realizes, hang on a minute, I'm no longer a caterpillar. I can't behave like a caterpillar. I've got a new body. I've got a new way of doing things. I've got new aspirations, new desires. I want to fly. Never wanted to fly before. And all of a sudden, you've got to realize that you've got to see yourself differently. And that, again, is not an external thing. That's an internal thing. And that starts with your values. It starts with, okay, who am I really? And I think we've both had on many occasions those points where I guess we sometimes underestimated how much our identity had become intertwined with what we did.
Yeah, and the understanding of who you are, your identity, has to be the starting point for all of this, because I think actually part of the process for me over the last 25 years, those moments of being right at the bottom of the valley, has been a wrestle with my identity more than what I'm doing in many ways, because it's when I get frustrated and misunderstand who I am, that's when the struggle becomes more difficult. And I think it's going back to what I said about, trusting in God, not looking at things and allowing them to become a pressure. So the fact I am a leader, that's not my primary identity. My primary identity is actually I'm a follower of Christ. I'm a leader second to that. And I think it's important that if we flip that around and we suddenly try to be this leader before anything else, we're actually going to really struggle. So changing a position, realizing first and foremost, I have to be a learner, I have to be a disciple, I have to be a follower of Jesus. The humility comes in that. Then secondly, now I know the purpose that God has given me to lead my family, to lead my team at work, to lead my church, to lead my circle, whatever that might be, but it flows from who I am to begin with.
And linking this to the framework now, and you'll find the framework on the Personal Revolution app, which you can download now from the App Store, Apple App Store, and also the Google Play Store. In the Grow section under Framework, you'll find the 7-step framework, which again, just linking back to this screen here, will help you understand how to navigate those 7 stations, as it were, to get you from A to C. Okay, so again, we've learned what is B. Well, we believe B is this process. It's a process of these 7 steps, and they're all steps that are rooted in the Bible. So in that sense, we haven't come up with them. All we've done is we've just distilled them down into 7 actionable steps. There are 7 mindsets that are connected to it, 7 habits also connected to it. But what we do in the app is just give you a 5-minute flavor of what each step is. But also there's a little activity that you can do that helps you with that step. And the step of identity is actually step 2, and it's your values. And again, in the app, you can actually identify what are your 5, what we call I am values, and your 5 I am not values. So think about it. I am not a caterpillar. I am a butterfly. Okay. I no longer sit on leaves eating all day. I am now flying through the air from place to place. And that's where my knowledge of what a butterfly does, I'm afraid. So I have to stop there. But again, you've got to look at it. I am a leader. I am not, just mindlessly following. Okay, we're all followers, but there's got to be a shift in the sense of I've got to step up now and lead, or I am devoted. I'm not apathetic. We've got to start to understand what are the things that we've got to shift from. It might be I recognize that I am a procrastinator. I'm lazy. I'm disorganized. And we've got to start to see ourselves differently. And of course, as you said, Leanne, for those on the discipleship journey, that is informed by our kingdom worldview, which is the Bible. It is the lens through which we see ourselves as God sees us. And so we've got to discern what those values are. A quick question for you, Leanne. What value, and I didn't preempt you with this, so I give you a chance just to think right now, like which value would you say, and you may say a couple, but which I am value do you think has been the most difficult to adopt, but has probably had the biggest impact, would you say?
Probably vision, which is a funny one, because you might look and go, for those of you who know us and know me, you might think, well, Leanne, of course you have vision. That's got to be one of your top values because you lead us. But actually, that's probably been the most difficult one for me that I have got on my list of I am statements that I want, that I have and carry vision. But I'm fully aware that when I get my position wrong, I can't always see. And it's understanding what seeing actually is. So it helps me see that I think very often wrongly, vision is all about having an absolute clear, tangible picture, and that is what we're doing, and that's that. Actually, vision is something far broader than that, I think, and it's something that you have in your heart. It's a desire. Sometimes you can't put it into words exactly. It's just something that you feel in your spirit. So I think that has been the one thing for me that I've really wrestled with, but it's probably shaped my journey because I want it so much. I've, had to rely even more on God to get that.
And that's interesting because I would say mine is clarity. And again, that might come as a shock to people, but honestly, the amount of times where I talk to myself and say, Gareth, you're there to help people with clarity, but sometimes I feel I'm in a place of total fog and like a pea soup, just like can't see my hand in front of me. And I want to encourage you, when you look at your I am values, look at a value that almost looks as alien as a butterfly does to a caterpillar, but there's a desire in you for that. And Leanne's was vision. Mine was clarity. What's yours? Okay. And you've, again, big thoughts then lead to becoming the big person that God wants you to become. So again, I encourage you, there has to be a shift of position, how you see yourself. Okay. The second shift is a shift of place. And so a shift of place we put down here for us, it has involved quite literal geographical places, but it could be a shift of place in terms of career. It could be a shift of place in terms of season. There are obviously many different places that we could put under that title, but that shift of place, and when you're in a new place, you have to get a picture of a new future. Okay, that's where the shift is. So again, going back to the image that we put up on the screen, you're now, the point A where you are right now was yesterday's point C. Okay, this is a cycle process. And so right now, there have been many times where we've literally sat down and we've talked about, right, we're at A, this is what C looks like. We haven't got a clue what B looks like, but we know these principles that are in the framework. Let's put them into practice. And that's helped us to make those transitions. But, today I am at point A, which was yesterday's C. And what I've got to do is get a picture now of what I can see from this vantage point. Like, what's the future that I can see? In the moment when I feel fearful, and here's the key, the antidote to fear is creativity. Creativity is the use of our imagination, God-given imagination. Go back to the caterpillar and the butterfly. What's the cell called that was active in bringing about the new version, the butterfly? The imaginal cell, the imagination cell. In the moment of darkness in the chrysalis, your imagination, inspired by a big God, needs to start to create a picture of a different future.
And it's interesting, you talked about it being a process like a cycle, how, once you get over that and you get to C, that becomes a new point A, because like I said, how we that point in 2015, but there's been many times since, and I'm probably on a different part of the journey right now, because but that's how you see growth. That's how you realize that you are growing and that you are moving forward and changing the place of where you are, the season or whatever that might be, because you look back and you go, oh, I have grown. That A to C before and the B there, I could do that quite easily now because I've learned through it. Whereas now I'm on a new journey of A to C, and that B looks like it's really insurmountable. I can't get through that. So it is a growth process, because you know that you're learning each stage. It's something more difficult. You could go back and do that last one because that was easy. Now this one is more difficult, and that's how you know that you are growing. But it is understanding that seasons, if you want to look at it like that, change of place, you can't stop a season, whether it's winter, autumn, summer, spring, whatever. In the natural, you can't stop it. And in a way, it's the same with our lives. You can't stop the season that you're going into. I can't change the fact I'm getting older. I can't change the fact that my children are no longer small and that my life looks different now.
You'd love to.
I would love to change that and have them little again. I can't change, or you might not be able to change the fact that your season of your life is different to what it used to be. Things that come in and aren't always great, that change the season that we're in. But that's okay, because God knows, and actually he wants to use the season that you're in. There is still growth even in the winter time. We just can't see what's happening beneath the surface. That kind of pit of B might feel like the darkest, coldest, bleakest winter right now, where it's bitingly cold and you just think, but do you know what? Even growth still happens even in the winter, right under the soil, in the flower beds. Things are growing. So it's understanding that they will just come through when you get to see. You'll see the result of what was happening at B when you get to see. So that change of place, that change of season, we can't always stop it. Sometimes we are in control of it, but sometimes we can't. But it's about embracing that and saying, well, what's going to happen in me in that time? Yeah,
really good. And again, as Leanne said, with vision, vision isn't necessarily where you always have a crystal clear picture of what it will be. The biblical picture that we have is Abraham. Abraham left everything that he knew that was very clear, a very clear picture of what he was leaving behind. And he went to a place that he did not know. He started to make his home in a foreign place. And so it's a process where sometimes it's a conviction, but it's not a clear picture. But the way you can start to get that clear picture, again, come to the app, is step 1 of the framework, where, again, if you go onto the app, you'll see you're encouraged to start to ask, what is it you don't want and why? Because sometimes you've got to look at point A right now and say, what is wrong with point A? Now, some of us may feel a little bit uncomfortable with this, because aren't we supposed to be content with where we are? And I believe there's a difference between contentment and complacency. I believe we are to be content in the growth journey, but contentment is not an excuse for no growth. We're either growing or we're dying, and contentment while we're dying is, I don't believe it glorifies God, and I don't believe it also honors the potential that we carry. And so know what it is you don't want and why, and start to think about different areas of your life. Start to think about those that you lead. What is it that I don't want to influence them to do? It may be that in your family line that you want a change of trajectory for your family. It could be in your sector, the area that you work. You want to see change in the NHS. You want to see change in education. You want to see change when it comes to, the care services. I could go on and on. But start to put what you don't want and why you don't want it. And then you start to think, well, what is it I do want? And that process, and that's why I invite you to keep going back to the app, not because we've built it, but because it's there as a tool to serve you. Because as you keep going through it, that cultivation process starts to generate clarity.
No, I was just going to say that we need all the help that we can get. We're good at forgetting when you put things down, when you write things down, when you put things into the app, whatever.
Absolutely.
It reminds us of where we are, but also where we need to be going. It keeps us accountable, keeps us vision in front of us.
And use the someday goal, which again, that picture of, this is in the goal section, that picture of, okay, this is where I want to go. This is where I want to arrive. And that is supposed to be almost a bit of a fuzzy picture. It's a far off goal, but it's a goal that kind of stirs your heart. It's a goal that's worth getting up for. It's a goal that you sense, right, well, if I serve a big God, does this dream honor the size of God, not just the size of how I see myself, okay? So that's the point of that. But the shift of place. The third shift is the shift of pace, okay? The shift of pace. Timing is one of the most painful parts of the process. We want to be there now. We were like it as children, and those of us who have had children have all heard that, are we there yet? Cry from the back. We have been that child. Okay, are we there yet? Can I have it now? And in one sense, that impatience in the process is something that we have to learn along the way. Yet there are things that we can accelerate in order to not lag behind. But in the metamorphosis process, the chrysalis stage cannot be hurried. In fact, there's a story of a scientist who, when he saw the butterfly start to emerge out of the chrysalis, actually took a scalpel and cut the chrysalis to release the butterfly early, and actually didn't realize that struggle was what was bringing strength to the wings, and that butterfly could not fly. You see, you've bypassed the stage of struggle too early. You actually remove the strength that you are going to need for the next season.
Yeah, and Paul talks about this, doesn't he? About God's power is made perfect in our weakness. We just want to get out of that and be strong and independent, but actually it's God's power that's made perfect in those moments. So it's important that we go at his pace and not ours, because we'd be immature, underdeveloped, and not ready. I think of so many times when I was in vision, thinking, yeah, we'll have this done in 8 weeks. We'll be there, bam, done. What I want will be achieved. And I look back and I think, God, in your wisdom, you held me or held us back or changed it, because I wouldn't have been ready. It would have been like sending a child out into the big wide world with absolutely zero maturity or experience. So I think God, in his wisdom, and that's what we have to trust, his sovereignty, his wisdom, that he's holding things back or putting things at his pace. But also, sometimes he speeds things up when we feel we're not ready. And it's
good.
Oh, God, no, you can't launch me into this now. I am absolutely not ready for this. And he's going, yes, you are, because fear is what's holding us back, not him. And so many times in the Bible, there's excuses, Moses and Gideon and various people go, no, just don't send me now. I'm not ready. I haven't got what it takes. And God's like, no, we're going to pick the pace up on this. We're going to go, because it's not you, it's me, God's saying. And so we have to be ready to go with what the speed that he is at, and the Holy Spirit is moving at, not us.
And I think it's a great point. The way that we make sure that we're not lagging behind, in other words, we're doing everything that we can do, and things that we're in control of, is, when it comes to the app, look at the goal section. And again, we encourage people to set milestones. Okay, so maybe you have a goal, for something to happen within, let's say, 12 months' time. Okay, so in 12 months' time, I'm going to use an analogy, and I'm probably going to say this over Leanne. Okay, so in 12 months, you're going to run a half marathon. And I know this actually is a desire that she has, but it's also a battle that she says, I'm not sure I can.
Oh, that's it. Now you've put that out there for everybody to hear.
Hey, well, let's see. And so, 12 months time, run a marathon. So in 3 months, what are some milestones? Okay, so milestone 1, okay, in the next month, I'm going to run a mile. Now, that wouldn't be difficult for you because you run more than that. But let's just say it's a mile. In the second month, milestone 2 is I want to run, 5 miles. And you get the idea. You start to break down the goal into manageable steps. Now, we've done this now for a number of years. We've applied what we're sharing with you. In fact, that's how we're doing this right now, is because we've done that. Have we always hit the timings that we thought? No, because there's a shift of pace. You've got to, and I've written this down here, you've got to move at the speed of trust. When you're in a discipleship journey, it's not just you, it is you with God. We walk with him and we work with him in order to win for him. And so there's a responsibility for me to do everything that I can do. And the way that I can make sure I'm doing that is to set goals, clear milestones. And then again, on your app, you can set a milestone. Then under every milestone, so it might be the milestone is I'm going to run a mile. Under each milestone, you can set tasks. In other words, the task might be buy a pair of trainers. Read about the right way of running so that I don't get a bad posture. Okay, it might be, is there a running club in my area? Find out. And you can check off your tasks, which are going to help you reach your milestone. Okay, so you can check off your milestone in a month, and then you're much further along the journey to hitting your 12-month goal. And then that 12-month goal might be tied into your someday goal that actually, when you are 80 years old, you're going to be jumping out of airplanes. You are going to be climbing Mount Kilimanjaro. Again, I'm just saying this over you, Leanne.
I don't agree. I do not have a vision for that.
But that's a way that, again, you can make sure that you are moving at a pace where you are putting everything into it. But also there's a tension. There is a trust. There is a sense in which we have to lean into God.
And without that, we are going to fail. So we'll probably just end up not even back at A, just stuck in B, which is
Yeah.
worse. So it's important that we take that on board.
Absolutely. And so then the fourth shift that we have to go through is the shift of priority. The shift of priority. Priorities change with seasons. And sometimes the pain that we're experiencing right now is because we're operating in yesterday's priorities. So we have a dream that is a butterfly dream, but we're still prioritizing sitting on the leaf, eating leaf all day, okay? And we can't make that a priority anymore. The priority has got to shift. It's got to change. And again, you know, when it comes to the discipleship journey here, we know, you know, that Jesus in Luke chapter 10, when he sent out the 72, he told them to leave behind their wallets, their cloaks. In other words, all the things that you and I would think is practically, you know, responsible to take with you when you're going on a journey. Jesus said, no, you leave them behind, because in my kingdom, there's a shift of priority. You seek first the kingdom and my righteousness, and everything else that you need is going to be added to you. The provision comes when you create movement, not I'll have movement when I've got the provision. And so there's a shift of priority. And I think, again, that takes evaluation, that takes reflection, and that's something, certainly for somebody like myself who just loves to just get on and put something into action, can naturally struggle with.
Yeah, and if something is not made a priority in your life, it will disappear eventually, or just become in the background. So priorities are not they're not reactive things. Oh, what's really important right now in front of me? It might become a priority that I have to fix that thing because it's urgent or it's kind of nagging at me. But actually, I have to be careful that I'm not reactive in my priorities, because then they'll just change from day to day. Priorities are a bit like your convictions. What are the important things that I know I need to do in order to get to where I need to get to? So I think back to 2015, that kind of hard day, but also I think about a difficult time in 2019 for me. It was only 4 years later. Oh dear, back at A and back at B again.
A different
a very different A and B. And I remember my priorities had shifted in terms of in a wrong way, and so things that should have been a daily discipline changed a little bit because I was starting to react to my life differently. I was reacting rather than being proactive, not sticking to my disciplines and discipleship, but just. And then what happened was, fell into a very, very dark time, and which probably was worse for me than 2015 in lots of ways. But I know that what got me through that and out of B into C, which I actually was convinced I was going to be stuck in B forever. That was just how I was now, you know. But no, it was about a change of priority, and it was about rediscovering who I am in Christ, who God is, his love for me, his purposes, his plans, how to manage thoughts, how to get control of feelings, all of those things. But also, I remember during that time, you kept saying to me, but what do you want? What is it you really want? And I everything in me was like, shut up. Because I didn't want to write down what I wanted, because that wasn't going to happen anyway. I was just going to be here forever. But actually, I've still got it, the list of what I want to see. Start writing it out. What do you want to see? It might seem impossible right now. It might seem like you're never going to get there. What's a priority? What's something or some things that you want to believe for and see? And as I began to write them out, you begin to believe it. And it's not mind over matter, mumbo jumbo. It's about getting your spirit alive again and saying, actually, yeah, why can't I believe for these things? Why can't I make these things a priority? And actually prioritizing those things helped me see past some of the stuff that I was paying attention to, lift my eyes a little bit, and then I began to climb, and it took months, but climb out of that B, which eventually to C. And of course then you start all over again, but you learn so much. But it was all about prioritizing, and that is about vision, which again for me was talking about a value that I wanted and I struggle with, because sometimes when you set your priorities in order and then you make yourself accountable to them, you've set yourself up, and you either go back on those or you push forward on those. And if you are accountable with somebody about your priorities, then it will help you. If you're not, then you're more likely to go back and go, well, nobody knew about that, so it doesn't matter.
Absolutely. And I think the tool here that we'd like to point you to is the evaluation wheel. You know, the evaluation wheel, I think, does exactly what Leanne just said, which is it takes the vision which drives your priorities, and it gets you to ask the question of different areas of your personal life, your health, your relationships, your finances, your development. Those are 4 areas that we've put into the wheel, but you can actually change the wheel and put your own headings there if there are other areas that you'd like to put. But those are 4, obviously, you know, areas that affect every person. And almost ask yourself the question, okay, if this is the future that I'm believing for, you know, big thoughts. Okay, what are the big changes that I've got to make? What have I got to start to prioritize in this season that I wasn't prioritizing last season? You know, one of the things in the shifts of place we had to prioritize was, you know, we knew within a few years we were going to make the move to London, or that was certainly our aspiration. Therefore, it required a change in how we operate with our finances. We knew it wasn't just going to happen. Now, we knew that there was still going to be a gap where we needed God to come through, but we needed to ask ourselves a question, right? What are the habits that we need to adopt right now? You know, budgeting, you know, understanding, you know, what does good stewardship look like in this area? Health is another one. You know, one of the things I wanted was at age 24 to be able to, at age 40, you know, keep up with my son, we didn't have a son then. We didn't know we were going to have a son, but I had a desire for a son, and I wanted to be able to play football with him. Okay, I have a son now. I keep up with him just about. And so again, you know, it's all about allowing the vision to drive your priorities. You know, professionally, again, you know, if you believe, you know, there's a business that God wants you to build, or you want to get a promotion to a greater responsibility in your workplace, okay, you can just behave the way that your current role says you should behave, or you can say, let me use the analogy of, let's say you're a teacher and you want to be a head teacher. Like, what priorities does a head teacher have? Okay, you know, what are the things that actually the priorities that they have that I almost can adopt the mindset of a head teacher now and start to apply that through my current role? In other words, increase that sense of responsibility, increase the sense of ownership, not just say, well, that's not my job. You know, start to carry that almost leadership persona. You know, and I believe as you become the bigger person that God wants you to become, then the gift makes way for the giver. You know, you will have opportunities to step into that new opportunity. We often wait for the opportunity to come to us before we change. No, you change and you make way for the opportunity. So the evaluation wheel is the tool we encourage you to use. What you measure and what you discuss in your growth circle around your evaluation wheel reveals what you truly believe. Okay? We can talk about all nice kind of headline things, but let's get into the nitty-gritty in our growth circles and start to look at those key areas, okay? The final shift, we're going to finish at past, is shift of proximity. Who you have around you. Butterflies, I certainly haven't seen this, don't hang out with caterpillars. There's a shift in relationships. The truth is, anybody can go on a growth journey, but not everybody will. And even Jesus had people who left him because the thoughts that he was giving to them about the kingdom were too big for them and too hard for them, and they left him.
Influence is such a huge part of kingdom growth. It's massive. If it's not about not helping certain people, you don't just cut off people from your life because, oh, you're not helpful to me now. We're to be there for so many different people in life. That's not what we're talking about. It's who you're intentionally being discipled by or being influenced by or following, etc. And I think it's really important that for whatever kind of area of life that you are in, again, if this is just something to do with your family or your job or something you desire to be involved in, get around those kinds of people or listen to those kinds of people, read books written by those types of people, watch podcasts, listen to different things. But ultimately, when you need help and guidance, you have to go to the Word of God. If you're a disciple of Jesus, that is the ultimate, because your proximity to God and to the right people is what will help. If you just go, oh, I don't need to do that, you know, I'll just shrink back and I'll listen to the people who perhaps are not even encouraging me, telling me not to bother doing that thing. Oh, it'll never work. you'll believe them. You'll take it on and go, yeah, it will never work. You need to get yourself around the right people who will encourage you, pray for you, help you. This is what growth circles are about as well. Those small groups that will say, do you know what, we're cheering you on. We believe that you can do this, or we're going to pray for you, or, we're going to help you stay accountable, whatever. It's so, so important.
And the section that we actually isn't yet there. Okay, this is the group section. So this is where we're going to encourage you to add people to a circle. Again, if it's a discipleship circle, you add people that you are wanting to be in community with, that you're going to be accountable to, you'll evaluate your priorities with, and you'll journey with for either a short time or a long time. And so that is where you surround yourself with like-minded people. Okay, you surround yourself with people who want to grow. Like Leanne said, it's not that I cut myself off from everybody else, but it's that I recognize if I don't protect time with the right people, I believe the principle is true. You become the sum total of the 5 people you spend the most time with. And so if I don't intentionally put myself around bigger people, then I will cap my growth. The disciples became high producing disciples, even though they were low producing people and high maintenance, and they ended up becoming high producing disciples and low maintenance men, because when Jesus left them, they then went and changed the world. 3.5-year journey to bring that amount of transition. That's greater than a caterpillar to a butterfly. And I believe that kind of transition is the journey that God wants you to go on and wants you to take others on with you. So look out. This feature will be very, very soon coming to the app. But of course, it doesn't stop you getting into a circle now. You don't need the app to do that. Obviously, that will be something that will help you with getting a circle.
Yeah, and it just reminds me of those verses in Acts when it says that they saw the courage of Peter and John, that they were ordinary, unschooled men, but they took note that these men had been with Jesus. It was obvious who they had spent time with. It was obvious who had made an impact and who had influenced them. And I want someone to look at me and go, well, she's just an ordinary person, but I can see she has spent time with the right people. She spent time with God. She has, got her priorities in place. And that only happens when we really discipline ourselves into that, to get in the proximity right, ultimately with God first, but then with the circle of people around us.
Absolutely. Well, I hope those 5 shifts have stirred your thinking, hopefully started to help you to think bigger thoughts. And our prayer is that as you journey with those thoughts, if you're a follower of Christ, that you'll involve God in that journey. If you're not, then why don't you think about starting to talk to God about your hopes, dreams, and aspirations, okay? I really want to encourage you to. There's so many people now that are starting to realize there's got to be something more than what I can see around me. So I really want to encourage you, stir you to think. And of course, you can connect with us at Everyday Champions and maybe find out about how you can find out more about, who Jesus is and this whole discipleship journey. But listen, we believe that there is more in you than you think. And this conversation and this community that we're starting to build through Personal Revolution is to equip you to be the bigger person, to think the bigger thoughts, to unlock your God-given potential, not just so you get to enjoy it, but because the world right now needs the change that you carry, needs you to become the person you were always intended to become. And so our prayer and our heart for you is that as we serve you through the app, through this conversation, through the many other tools and conversations that are to come, then we hope that it will bless you and it will help you. So listen, we want to remind you that today and every day you are a champion and that there is more in you than you think. Until next time on our live stream in December, check out the website, personalrevolution.tv. All the details will be there. Take care of yourself.
See you soon.